wanting that person to be punished in the most severe way, the harshest way, that in itself does not mean that you don't forgive. I wanted to talk a little bit about that moment where Erika forgives her husband's killer. You, of course, have seen this many times by now, but doesn't hurt to watch it again. And there's a point that I want to make about it. So let's play that clip again.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men just like the one who took his life. That young man. On the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Love for our enemies and love for those who persecute us.
Very powerful moment. The whole speech was extraordinary. There's not any superlative that I can heap on it that hasn't already been used, and accurately so. Erika's speech was one of the great speeches I've ever heard. Period. It was historical in every sense of the term. But this moment has also caused a lot of debate, and for right now, I'm not worried about what leftists are saying about it. We'll get back to that later. But there are people also on the right, conservatives and Christians, on social media that I saw who were expressing, confusion or disappointment in the fact that Erika forgave the assassin who killed her husband. And I saw plenty of comments that said, words to the effect of, well, she can forgive him, but I still want him to get the death penalty, and that kind of thing. And other people claiming that Erika was, in essence, sort of letting her husband's killer off the hook by forgiving him. But this is a misunderstanding of Christian forgiveness. And in some ways, it's an understandable misunderstanding because the church in the West has been neutered and feminized in modern times. And so concepts like forgiveness have also been neutered and feminized. And the reality is that oftentimes when forgiveness is preached, when it's preached from the pulpit, very often, they are indeed preaching a version of forgiveness that essentially means letting bad guys off the hook. The woke DAs and judges who release violent criminals back onto the streets will talk about forgiveness. They'll talk about compassion. They'll cloak it in that sort of language. So that's how people have come to understand it. And so when they hear forgiveness, that's what they think. But that is not what forgiveness actually means. You can punish an evildoer. You could punish him in the most severe way possible. You can punish him by killing him, by executing him, while also practicing forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a replacement for justice. And just to illustrate that point, I posted this on X yesterday. I'll make the point here, just kind of an analogy or an illustration. And this came to mind immediately when people were talking about this. But I think about, if you've ever seen Lonesome Dove, it's the greatest, I'm sure I've talked about it on the show before. It's the greatest Western of all time. Technically, it was a television miniseries, but I think it still is one of the great films ever made. Top 10 for me. And there's a great scene about midway through the story, I think, by my memory. And it came to mind when I heard, saw some of the reaction to Erika's speech, in particular that moment about forgiveness. So if you're not familiar, the story follows a group of cowboys on a dangerous cattle drive from Texas to Montana. And along the way, in the story, they stumble across one of their old friends, whose name was Jake. And he'd fallen in with this gang of murderers and horse thieves. Even though Jake had never killed anyone himself, he didn't actively participate in any crimes, but he was part of this group. He didn't stand up to this criminal, to his criminal cohorts. He didn't make any real attempt to leave them. He just kind of stayed with them and went along with it. And that meant that in the eyes of our cowboy protagonists, who are led by two retired Army Rangers played by Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones, in their eyes, he was just as guilty as the rest of them, and he had to pay the same price. Justice demanded that they execute the whole group, the whole gang, including Jake. And in the show, Jake briefly pleads for his life. He makes the point that, he didn't kill anyone. None of this, none of this was his idea, and he didn't want to do it. It wasn't his fault. But Robert Duvall's character, Gus, had a simple reply. He said, well, you ride with outlaws, you die with outlaws. I'm sorry you crossed the line, son. And he was sorry. But Gus knew that, they had to do what they had to do. So they put the rope around Jake's neck and they offer him some final words of kindness and forgiveness. And then they hang him. And they left the rest of the gang hanging from the tree as a warning to other horse thieves. But they cut Jake down. They gave him a proper Christian burial. And then they rode on. It was a tragic moment for them. They didn't want to kill their friend, but they had no choice. He was owed a certain punishment, and justice means giving a man what he's owed. And it was just as simple as that. You were a part of this. This is what you're owed. I wish we didn't have to do it, but we do. You crossed the line, son. And that to me is Christian forgiveness. I mean, that is a to me perfectly illustrates really Christian forgiveness. And I know you're not going to hear that you're not going to hear that very often. You're not going to hear that scene or anything like it used as an example of Christian forgiveness in most churches. They're not going to say a scene in a show or a guy's where they hang a guy that is a Christian forgiveness, but it is. It is. If your mattress has the supportive qualities of wet cardboard and you wake up each morning feeling like you need an on-call chiropractor, then it's time to check out Helix Sleep. Improve your nights and start genuinely sleeping well so you can wake up each morning feeling like you actually got some rest and you're ready to take on whatever the day has in store. Never realized how badly I needed a new mattress until I finally got one. I've had my Helix mattress for a while now, and I couldn't be happier. It does incredibly well with temperature regulation, which really eases some of those annoying middle-of-the-night wake-ups. Keeping cool and comfortable is essential for me. Plus, it's easy to connect to other wearable devices, so you can actually see the data to back up your sleep improvements each night. No more questioning. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually match you with the perfect one for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, they've got you covered. All you have to do is take their sleep quiz and find your ideal match. And trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. Right now is a perfect time to upgrade your sleep because Helix is offering a fantastic extended Labor Day sale. Go to helixsleep.com/Walsh to get 25% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Walsh for 25% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know that we sent you. helixsleep.com/Walsh. The current debate about the concept of forgiveness assumes that we have to choose between punishment or mercy, between justice or forgiveness, but we don't have to choose. These are dimensions of each other. It's not an either-or scenario. To forgive a man who commits a heinous crime, what that means is that you don't harbor hatred for him in your heart, that you're not living with resentment towards him. that you want him to be saved. You want him to go to heaven. And you can feel that way about somebody, even as you're putting the noose around their neck. Legally, while carrying out a legal execution. And that is, in fact, the most Christian way to handle violent criminals. That's the most Christian way. It is to pray for their souls and then to send them off to meet God. And then God will decide what happens next. That's justice. And that is forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean that you have that they don't get punished. That is not what forgiveness means. Now, if I was in Erika's shoes, if God forbid, my wife was killed by some evil scumbag, I would certainly want the killer to be convicted and executed for his crimes. But that wouldn't mean that I would lack forgiveness. Lacking forgiveness would mean, if I lack forgiveness, it would mean that I am living every day of my life from that moment on, boiling in rage and hatred towards the killer. And hoping not only for his death, which is justice. It's okay to want that. I should want justice. As a Christian, you should want justice in the world. And sometimes that means that a person has to leave. They have to leave the world. They bought their ticket out, and that's justice. So if I wanted that, it wouldn't mean that I don't have forgiveness. But if I'm boiling in hatred, hoping not only for this person's death, but also that they burn in hell, that they aren't saved, and they burn in hell for all eternity, then that would mean that I lack forgiveness. And here's the thing. I'll be very honest and say that if I were in that situation, if that did happen to my wife or my child, I feel, and we can't know exactly how we would react, but I feel very sure that I would hate that person until my dying breath. I wouldn't just want them dead. I would want them to burn in hell and be tortured by demons for 1 billion years, and then another billion and another billion after that, for all time. Which is to say that I think I probably would lack forgiveness in that situation. I can't say for sure how I would respond to such an atrocity if it happened to my own family, but I'm pretty sure that's how I would respond. Just having a bit of self-awareness, I think I would lack forgiveness. I think I probably would be consumed by hatred, like forever, towards that person who did that horrible thing to the person that I love. I'd probably wake up every morning hating that person, and I'd go to bed hating them every day for the rest of my life. But that's my own weakness. I admit that. That is a weakness that I think I would have in that situation. I don't think I'd be strong enough to have anything but burning rage and hatred in my heart for the person who harmed my loved one. But again, and that's the difference. So that's also when we talk about how it takes strength to forgive. Again, all this stuff now, when you say that, it sounds like a cliche. It sounds like, oh, be the bigger man, and it's like if you get punched in the nose and you just walk away and somebody says, oh, you were the bigger man. No, you weren't the bigger man. You were afraid. You walked away because you were afraid. You were a coward. So we use these terms and they don't really mean anything anymore, but there is meaning behind it. And it actually does take strength to forgive. And this is what the strength would be. You still want justice to be done, but the strength is like the moral and spiritual fortitude to not be totally consumed by hatred and resentment for the rest of your life. That's where the strength comes in. I don't know that I would have that strength. I think I probably wouldn't. But Erika does. And I greatly admire that. But again, wanting that person to be punished in the most severe way, the harshest way, that in itself does not mean that you don't forgive. You can forgive and also punish. And that's the point. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.